Hello, and welcome to Expert Talks on the Punchdown. I am your host, Lauren Heindel, a former winery production professional turned into a wine industry community builder. And I am super excited to continue this series of Expert Talks today. So the current state of the wine industry knows the importance of taking a strategic, data-driven, and customer-centric approach to DTC, right? Our findings with our recent State of the Wine Business survey results, it showed that the healthiest wineries, they really lean on DTC with about a 65 to 35 split. So in that way, they can better control their margins and their brand messaging to their consumers. Our survey also found that cash flow positive wineries maintain a strong emphasis on DTC sales. So I know we know this, but now more than ever, DTC is super important. If you want to read more about that, I'll link our survey to download that below this video. But what are some ways that you can grow your DTC channel? How can you nurture that customer base that you already have? And how can you have a new approach to looking at your DTC list? Well, I have got a treat for you today. I'm here with Paul Leary, the owner of Assemblage Strategy Group, who has an extensive background in sales and marketing in the wine industry. He led Duckhorn from a single label to multiple labels and beyond, and has a lot of experience in the DTC world. Today, Paul is breaking down the 6 segments of customer data and how you can best utilize this to target your customers and in turn, increase your customer loyalty and your lifetime customer value. This episode is perfect for anyone who's selling wine in this modern world and really is looking for a fresh take on DTC. So we're very lucky to have you today, Paul, on this episode of Expert Talks. Thank you for being here with me today.
Absolutely. It is great to be here with you. And I love all that InnoVint is doing to help build community, and your winery health report is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So let's begin by, if you could give us a brief background on yourself and how you ended up being sort of this DTC data guru that you are today.
Sure. So I am a 4th generation Californian, but we won't go back that far. How about that?
Okay.
Start a little bit closer, but I was been in Northern California for all my life, and in the Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley more recently in the last 25 plus years. As you mentioned, I worked with Duckhorn, and working with Duckhorn in my mid-20s really taught me the importance of data. And that was working directly with Dan Duckhorn, the founder, CEO, and president of the company. His intensity of focus on data in every aspect of the business was inspiring. I headed up all things DTC at that time, and ultimately we were working on a legacy system called AMS that still exists today for many wineries. And it caused us to have to really understand data structure, because the system was built in a way that you'd have to mine for that data, search, and really dig deep. And so one of the most important things with data, and specifically DTC data as we're talking about today, is to be curious. And so I was forced to be curious to try to find out what was going on with customers and orders and memberships, et cetera. And so that really got me started, because I was forced to, in a way, and it was healthy. I was having a conflict with myself and the database system to try to see if I could extract what I wanted to, and ultimately we would get there. Today, it's not that difficult. Today, there's a lot more sitting right in front of you, and ultimately that's what I do with Assemblage, is try and help wineries make data-driven decisions.
Wonderful. And apologies if I pronounced your company name incorrectly. Assemblage Strategy Group.
All good. We're on the same page.
There we go. Well, great. I love hearing about people's journeys and how they sort of end up where they are now. And just a quick disclaimer, I always like to throw this out there. This information is not to be taken as legal advice. This is all from Paul's experience in this particular region in the wine industry. And I encourage all of you watching this to reach out to Paul with additional questions and continue the conversation below in the punchdown comments. Well, let's begin. Let's ask, I'd like to ask you now, what is the current temperature of DTC in the wine industry from your point of view today?
Right. So let me speak to kind of the California perspective, because I know there may be people in other regions of the country or the world, but what I see is a mixed bag. And some are accelerating and they're growing their business, and some are flat and some are declining. When you look at DTC, and this doesn't just relate to wine, it can relate to many different products that sell direct to consumer. I put it into the 4 buckets: POS, meaning in-person sales, website, meaning e-commerce sales, membership or subscription for recurring. And then the 4th bucket that people don't talk about as much, but is becoming more and more critical, I term outreach, where you're actually doing a lot of focused one-to-one, either in-person, email, SMS communications with your client to capture sales. That's the channel where I think a lot more wineries in this case are seeing DTC growth. It takes a lot of diligence and segmentation, but there's growth there. POS sales, what you have for people standing in front of you at a winery or some sort of a retail setting, from a Northern California's perspective, it's stagnant. And it's stagnant because we were riding some highs post-COVID. We were riding some highs before COVID. And then post-COVID, after that kind of travel bug kind of wore out and people started to calm back down of being at home, I think that had an impact. And ultimately, certain areas to travel to, let's say Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley, become expensive for certain tourists as well. So that's changed. So the wineries themselves have to be a lot more creative in how they not only attract, but re-invite their clients and members back to their physical location. Membership, again, a mixed bag. So you see a good amount of attrition. There's a lot of fatigue out there with subscriptions and memberships in general. And I'm not just talking about wine. So it's really important to differentiate. Yeah. And maybe the signups are not as healthy as they were COVID, post-COVID, just right after. Last one, e-commerce, you have to invest, right? You have to invest in getting your website to not be passive and actually be an active lead source for you. And certain brands do that. They do a lot of social and search advertising, and they get into return on ad spend metrics as a basis for how they define success. But I think most still rely on email campaigns, meaning outbound campaigns, to drive e-commerce sales. But that at some level we see as challenging as well, just getting those conversions. So I'd say it's a mixed bag overall, but those that are committed to the channel and have intense discipline in the channel, and one of the topics we're going to talk about here shortly, have high segmentation in the channel, are doing better.
Yes. You also touched on creative ways to reach new people, and I know we're going to touch on that a little bit later because you mentioned some cool things that you've done in the past that have increased your DTC sales. So that's a wonderful take, and I think that's pretty spot on for the current state of DTC, at least in Northern California, where I'm located as well. So as you previously mentioned to me, though, the success of a wine brand really lies in correctly utilizing and segmenting your customer database. That's like the bread and butter today. So I would love to hear from you just a little bit more about what that means and how you can really do that and implement that as a winery, from the small guy who makes a couple barrels of each label to all the way up to some of the 100,000 case wineries.
Absolutely. So I'll go back a little bit. After Duckhorn, way back when, I started my own wine company with a group of investors and partner, and that brand's called Blackbird in Napa Valley. We had brands beyond Blackbird as well. There were different price point tiers, and then we had non-wine brands as well, meaning other consumer businesses. So we were a multi-brand portfolio. And from day one, as I'd been at Duckhorn, and again, learned a lot about how to differentiate and create competitive advantage through Dan Duckhorn and the team there. One of the things that I decided early on was we were going to use technology as a competitive advantage. To that end, literally when we launched Blackbird and ultimately the successive brands, we started on Salesforce. And this is back in 2007. So Salesforce was a company that was started in the early part of the 2000s. We started on it, as a very small customer, and ultimately grew it so that we could utilize the capabilities of a CRM, a true CRM, for how we look at customer segmentation. And I'll never forget, it was probably around 2011 or 12, I was reading an article, yes, about like database best practices. Very boring, I understand. But I came upon this article and a graphic that said, do you understand your customer segmentation? Do you really understand the power? And the health is the operative word of your database. And the health was really the word that caught my attention, because I don't think people look at their database as actively as they should and understand the health of it. Just like they'd understand the health of their wine inventory and they have to sell products by a certain time while they're still in their prime. Database has the same mindsets. So what we really looked at from an early on is those 6 segmentations that we wanted to come up with. And then ultimately, through automation, not very complicated, but simple algorithm automation, we were able to create inactive and active statuses of a prospect, a client, and a member. So there's 3 different types in there. Prospect, never purchased. Client has at least 1 purchase. And member being if you have a membership or a subscription program. Those are the 3 tiers. We double those tiers by adding an element of time. And what I mean by that, if you just take the prospect for a moment, an active prospect is someone that has a create date in the system less than, let's say, 1 year or 2 years. So from today, someone that's got a create date, and every great system has a create date for that initial customer account in the system. So you would say that's an active prospect. They're a customer, but they have no purchases. An inactive prospect is someone that's in that system, but has a create date prior to that, let's say 2 years. That is the difference between how you would categorize 2 different types of prospects. And it's important. If someone's expressing interest, you want to bring them closer to the brand. If they've been in the database for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and they don't have a purchase from you, that's not a healthy prospect. That's someone that's just languishing in there. And you would be, no, you may not be surprised if you ask someone, hey, tell me about your database. 10,000 names, 50,000 names, bigger brands, 100,000 names. A high percentage of them are inactive or active prospects. So you have to start there of understanding who is in the non-purchase realm versus active client. Active client, someone's got a purchase. Inactive client, someone that doesn't have a purchase since a year, 2 years, whatever you see is relevant. I think active member and inactive member makes sense, right? So we know what that is, someone that's actively becoming a member and purchasing versus inactive. Though I also see issues there in many databases where, oh yeah, they're a member. In reality, they haven't purchased in multiple membership purchase cycles, 2, 3, 4. That's not an active member. That's not even an active customer if they have no other purposes.
Yeah.
You're over to an inactive client. And otherwise, you're basically hyperinflating or falsifying your data of what is the health of your database.
Yeah, this is very interesting. And do you find there's certain like habits or techniques that you use to make sure you're constantly cleaning this data?
Right, absolutely. So, again, I'm going to remind, myself and our listeners that what we created and what I've created now for other clients is in a CRM. And because a CRM like Salesforce, Sales Cloud, or HubSpot, or things like that, have a lot of capabilities to automatically put people into certain buckets based on specific criteria. So that is the penultimate. But let's say you're not able to today invest that time or money in a CRM. Well, if you're using a wine industry-based system like HubSpot, Commerce 7, very well-known system out there, you can do a lot. And you can do a lot with the use of tags. Tags are a highly functional tool in many types of databases to be able to either manually, or in this case, as we're talking about, Lauren, automatically add a tag to a customer when they reach a certain criteria. Create a date prior to, create a date post. And ultimately, it doesn't take that much. What I was quoting there was create a date for a customer, which would be a prospect, to just constantly go in and update those tags, right? Because you can say have a create date of anyone that is greater than a year is an inactive prospect. Today, in early November, we could go back in December, even January, whatever's appropriate, and re-query that tag and make sure it's reflective of January 1 year ago, meaning January 24, if we were doing this in January of 25. So tags, and specifically automated tags, are a great way, just like when you think you have members, most members in systems like Commerce 7 have a tag that you can easily associate so you can offer a promotion being for product or shipping or what have you. Think about that same scenario, not just for members, but for helping to categorize the specific accounts, customers, active, customers, inactive, prospects, etc. It's one way to do it. There's numerous ways, but what you don't want to do is to get any sort of text format, which is non-reportable, or any sort of manual process. You want to make sure you can use some sort of automation around it.
Yes, I was just going to summarize that. Automation is the key word here. Automated tags, just to make everyone's life easier. And the technology these days allows you to set that up once, really, and then you can audit it from afar, essentially, or once a quarter versus every day. And I'm also hearing is all of this front loading work, all of this automated tagging will allow you to really personalize the experience that you have or that you give to these different customer segments. Is that correct?
100%. And so, there's something to be said of the term customer journey. And the customer journey is basically where that customer is at with you in the experience with your brand or business. For example, where am I at with my Amazon customer journey? I am all the way in, right? Like many people, we are deep. I'm also in with Apple.
Guilty.
We're all in deep with certain brands. My customer journey with Apple, everything that I own from a functional, technology perspective, hardware and software, is Apple because it just works. So Amazon and Apple, I'm deep in their customer journey. You need to understand where people are at in their customer journey with you. And what I mean by that is, are they at the beginning of the journey, there's a prospect, or are they much farther along where they're a 5-year, 10-year member, and they're not just a member, they could be an ambassador for you. And so you could take that active member tier, the one that is kind of the penultimate, because I think many wineries would say if we had thousands, tens of thousands of active members to InnoVint's winery health survey, you'd be winning. And there are brands out there that have tens of thousands of members. And if you look at them, they are winning. Just take it, though, where it's not the new member, right? Someone that signed up, let's say, in the last 6 months, find the member of 10 years, talk to them differently, and talk to them in a way that's respectful of their loyalty. Now, that's the easy thing to do. With all due respect, that's easy. Again, you'd be amazed how many brands just don't do that. They don't recognize where they are. It's easy to recognize people when they give or, pardon me, have the behavior you desire, which is loyalty to your business. It's harder when they're over here in the inactive prospect and they're not showing loyalty. As we know, most people don't show loyalty. It's totally natural. And we have to speak to them differently. And, to the inactive prospect or even the active prospect, it's point blank important sometimes just to say, do you want to continue to know about us? Are you interested in our products? And you say it in the right way, and you're literally asking them to say yes, no, or maybe. And you can do a CTA on that without exaggeration, a call to action that says just click a button through a form. And that would give you an understanding of, okay, I can remarket to them, or no, I need to let them die and I need to unsubscribe them, or whatever that is. But be honest with where you're at. We went to the extreme of like members and ambassador versus an inactive prospect. It's those in the middle, right, that you have some of the greatest opportunity with. People that have been an active client, have shown a propensity to purchase a certain product or set of products. That's the first and foremost opportunity. Segment based on number of orders related to certain products. They have told you what they like. Go back to them with those specific items. And I think we can all agree that are listening to this. And Lauren, as we talk through this, I'm still amazed how many large businesses and consumer goods don't market specifically on what I've purchased before. Right? They market a plethora of items, which cause me to go, maybe, maybe not. You know why? Because we're all busy. We all have so many messages coming at us through so many different platforms. If let's say I was a fan of Patagonia, which I am, as a phenomenal clothing brand, an amazing mission as a company, saying that I like this fleece or they know I like fleece is a very focused way to say maybe they got a different style, a different color pattern, different zip, versus getting me into mountaineering, which I've never bought any mountaineering items from them, and I'd love to, but I just haven't. So being really specific to where they're at with not only product, but I'd also say channel. Channel's another way when you think about prospect, client, and member. Remember that ultimately you should be looking to see, do they purchase in a POS setting but not the web, or vice versa? Do they purchase in an outreach scenario? And if they do, make sure they're on your list if you're going to do outreach. Understand that you're trying to move people into multiple channels, because when you move them into multiple channels, what happens? Loyalty.
Your conversion rate goes up. Yeah, and you add loyalty.
Because they interact with different parts of the business, right? Again, I'll take Apple. Apple's incredible for its in-store experience, right? It's incredible for how easy it is to check out. But one of the things that's most amazing to me about Apple is their customer support is second to none of how quickly they look to solve problems. And you can get someone on the phone, right? So that means that ultimately you got to meet the customer where they are, and you have to make sure that you're trying to get them into other channels, because the more channels they get into, the greater loyalty potential they have with you.
Yeah, definitely. It's like all of us learn differently, right? Some of us are visual learners, some of us are audio learners, and audible. There we go. Some of us are audible learners, and we need to have the material presented to us in the way that we best receive it. Same thing with coming at the customer with the channel that they want to be approached with. So incredible. Just to kind of summarize the 6 segments, you talked about how there are 6 essential segments within your customer data that you really should be talking to differently, like we just said. Those are active prospects, inactive prospects, active customers, inactive customers, active members, and inactive members.
Exactly.
Right? And they all need to be nurtured in a different way. Excellent.
And those are the core, right? Like I was kind of alluding to, you can splinter off that 10-year member because they're almost an ambassador. But that list is going to be very small. But think about the power of that list versus the opposite end, the lack of depth of the inactive prospect. But I mean, just start with prospect, client, member, and then bring time into it. Bringing time into it to me is very relevant. You have to think about what the right amount of time is between a purchase that's appropriate of whether or not you consider them active.
Yeah, because that's different for every wine brand. Absolutely. And different for every wine variety as well. So, well, okay, I'm going to ask you to give me one example here. So say we have an inactive member, so someone who was a member for a couple of years but recently canceled their membership, and like you said, keeps pushing off their shipment. So how would you speak to them if they liked to buy online?
100%. So if they've been a member for 3 years and ultimately they start to not purchase during multiple membership cycles and they choose to cancel, let's say that they choose to cancel. They actively want the business to cancel. Great. They're still a customer. They just don't happen to be a member. Very important point, but it's incredible how many people just get dropped, if you will. Even though they show tremendous loyalty, they're actually still a loyal customer because of all that they purchased previously. So the first thing, in my opinion, is to give them space. And it's making sure they know that you appreciate them. You can immediately send that email. You can send that personalized note card as a point of difference, right, to what people would do today. But make sure it's highly personalized. And you can use variable fields or personalized language in a note card to make sure that you see them. Meaning, thank you so much for being a member for the past 3 years. We truly appreciate it. Our cellar door is always open to you. We look forward to welcoming you to the winery, or of course to blah.com soon. Think about that. No call to action, just kind of a graceful invitation. And then figure out what's appropriate. 3 months, 6 months later, have a task, have a flag, check in. And let's say that Sally Smith was that member. Checking back in, Sally, how are the wines from X winery showing in your cellar? Just making sure you've had a chance to enjoy them. Any recent wines that have shown well? Because you know that they had some of the wines in the cellar, especially if they're reds, they've potentially been around. Again, no CTA, no call to action, just communicating. And then whatever cadence further based on whether or not they reply, don't reply. But again, what we're trying to do here is create dialogue, is ultimately try and get them back in based on the product affinity that they'd had before. Not your new product, right? Not the more expensive product, not the less expensive product, the product for which they had the greatest affinity. And many systems now, that's sitting right in front of you. You can see where they've had the greatest product affinity. And in great CRMs, that data can be easily put through an automation process to say, here's the product family that they have an affinity for. Think of product family as a varietal or a specific varietal and designation without any vintage or format size associated with it. And you can just, if you look at it from a product family perspective, and a lot of businesses look at their sales from a product family perspective, you can also look at your customer from a product family perspective to see how to take that member that you lost, but respected, nurtured with gratitude, and tried to get back in, see what they say. Again, if they don't, that's okay. Keep it going if appropriate. If not, let it lie. And guess what? Time has passed. Move on to the next one that unfortunately canceled because they churn.
Yeah, that's such a good example. I love to hear your thoughts on all of these different segments. So let's go on to new customer acquisition. I guess you could call these active and inactive prospects, right? So
yeah,
yes,
exactly. So
okay.
customer acquisition, any business in the world, almost any business has difficulties with it, right? The best companies in the world don't, because they have what is called product market fit. People just know that they need this product. And that's what, big financing companies love to back because they don't have to do any marketing. Customers come to them, right? So customer acquisition is difficult for most companies. And one of the reasons to have segmented databases like what we're talking about today, Lauren, is because take some of your most loyal active clients or most loyal active members, and what are they? They are your referral marketing specialists, right? And it's not automatic. You cannot assume that they want to go to work for you. And I literally use this, internally with our team in the past and with our clients. Do the clients want to speak positively on your behalf, referral marketing? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to ask them to. You have to enable them. You have to help them tell the story. So a lot of that is making sure they understand the story, that you're constantly feeding through what differentiates your brand. When you can tell that story eloquently and when they can repeat it simply, ultimately you're asking and reminding them to, hey, we'd love to have your personal network, your collegiate network, your professional network as part of this wine experience. And it's amazing how when you remind people that they can do that and bring people to the physical location. Many people do that, and that's how most wineries gain a good percentage of their new customers, is from others that bring another couple. You need to put that mindset on steroids. You need to add fuel to that fire. How do you constantly remind those active clients or members to bring them? And I laugh all the time, and sarcastically I laugh when people say, oh, we only allow for X tastings per member per year. I'm like, really? You only allow for that many people to come back and really experience your brand or bring others? I don't understand why that would ever be a policy. That's the silliest policy I've ever heard of. These people want to bring people and bring you customers. So let's think about the ultimate client or member and what they can do. But also just remember that even if they're not a high value client, even if they're not, let's say the highest purchasing average order value client, they could still be a phenomenal networker. And this is where you get into understanding your database a little bit more and realizing that this customer X, may not have the highest lifetime financial value, but you know what they could have? A solid financial value, a decent average order value, and a lot of referrals, which I then correlate to indirect financial value. Okay. And certain systems can do this well, and certain systems cannot, where basically you're tracking the referrals from that customer and looking at the value of the people that they referred in and combining it with that individual's customer's financial value. So you have A plus B equals C, right? Not just the financial value. If you look at it that way, you will see that having the network effect of those referrals can be notable. And if you continue to empower that person, and that's the secret sauce, how do you empower that person? It's not a question of why, it's a question of how. Then ultimately, you are having them go to work for you. They are an ambassador. And guess what? The wine industry is an industry where people love to say they're in the know, right? They don't want to say they're in the know about a lot of products. They definitely want to say they're in the know about wine because there's storytelling, there's beauty, there's shared experiences around a table or a setting. So when you add all that up together, this is actually all pretty easy. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I was going to say.
You know what it takes? It takes curiosity and discipline and making sure you apply the resource mindset to your database.
Definitely. You mentioned to me before that you have implemented some creative customer acquisition tactics. Do you want to touch on those briefly?
Sure. I mean, I think what we were talking about the other day, not as much of a referral marketing scenario, but a strategic marketing scenario. And that's one that I've always focused on over the years. Strategic marketing partner is a like-kind business or an organization that shares customers of similar values to you, meaning your business. So it could be demographics, it could be geographics, definitely has something to do with household income level, and propensity to purchase certain types of products. So what we did in 2017 at Blackbird, we had a location on the riverfront in the city of Napa, and it was right next to Morimoto Restaurant. And ultimately, we were probably about, as the crow flies, 250 yards to Bottle Rock, Napa Valley, the huge memorial weekend celebration for music. And when we were running that retail setting there and Bottle Rock came through the first year we were there, I looked around and it was quiet. It was quiet because everyone was over at the music venue. The businesses that were running were the hotels, the breakfast joints, and the late night bars. Retail was suffering. I happened to meet someone from Live Nation Entertainment, which is the majority owner of Bottle Rock now, I believe. I'd met them at a conference, believe it or not, a tech conference 6 months earlier, picked up her card, reached out to her via email and said, hey, you all are involved in Bottle Rock now. Would you ever have an artist, that would be interested in doing a retail pop-up concept? She said, yeah, absolutely, but we're buried now. Reach out to me in 6 months as we get closer to Bottle Rock. Well, then the lineup came out. Hadn't talked with her, and the Foo Fighters were the headliner. Well, Foo Fighters for Blackbird and the age group that we were looking for, at the time, those were 45 to 65-year-olds, spot on. People that were spot on going back to Nirvana days. These are people that should have the household income and the geographies of where we're at. Long story short, we inked a retail pop-up with the Foo Fighters through their artist management agency. And we did a pop-up at our retail location for 3 days as part of Bottle Rock. And that was great. We rebranded some of the Blackbird wine with Bottle Rock, Foo Fighter labels that were really cool. And they had full, ability to design. And Foo Fighters and their group brought in all the merch that you'd normally find at a concert, but this was only available here, not at Bottle Rock, at our location. So that was all great, good, fine. We had lines out the door. We created a lot of buzz. That wasn't the key. As I sat there about 3 months prior to us executing, I said, I ran the average order values based on number of transactions I think we do per day. And like, that's a nice number, but I'd want a bigger number. So I was able to talk to them and say, well, wait a sec, whatever product we have left over, because I assume we would after running how many people we could actually service, I said, we're going to put it in a private store, hidden URL. It's going to be just the wines that are left over, the Foo Fighters wines. And you, Foo Fighters, please, you have an obligation to repost our post to Instagram to your X millions of followers, this link to that store to purchase these one-of-a-kind items. And thousands of orders later, I'm not going to get specific, or hundreds of thousands of dollars later, over a 3-week period, it was phenomenal to see how a partnership could drive that sort of volume. And as you might imagine, those people were active customers. And critically, we gave them a lead source. And that lead source was Foo Fighters' Bottle Rock partnership. Because that lead source is very different from someone that comes in just to taste the wine, the branded wine, if you will, at another time. What I mean by that is you have to market to that person differently than you would the normal wine brand. So the partnership's interesting. That's a penultimate example that I gave, but it's an example that's out there. And the use of data, the systems to manage this, and ultimately the right lead source allow us to remarket in the right way.
Definitely. That really kind of ties all this together, doesn't it? The
Yes.
importance of leveraging technology and data to drive DTC success is really the only way forward in this current state of the wine industry that we're living in. Especially with the amount of data that's available at our fingertips with, as you mentioned, Commerce 7, and as you know, InnoVint. There's so much data that we can really mine and use to best succeed. So that being said, I want to just give you a moment if there is a way for anyone to connect with you after this, if they want to ask more questions, how would they do that?
Yeah, so Paul Leary, I'm the founder of Assemblage Strategy Group. We're based here in Northern California, Sonoma County. AssemblageStrategyGroup.com. You'll find information on there. You can also email me, paul@AssemblageStrategyGroup.com, or just go to LinkedIn and look me up and connect with me there, message. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I'd love to chat. If you just want to, talk through what's working, what's not working, or if you want to talk about an opportunity to see if we can help you really understand your data better, because you don't want the data to be stagnant. You don't want it to be a liability to you. It has to be an asset. And there are a lot of people that are sitting on a lot of opportunity when they segment their data more specifically and take the customer where they're at in their journey and respect them, communicate to them based on that stage.
Great. Well, that was so helpful and a ton of fun. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Absolutely.
And I hope that our viewers got inspired and maybe had some ideas pop up, because we're just spewing so much good information. Thank you for joining us again, Paul. I appreciate your time and your knowledge. And that's a wrap for this episode of Expert Talks on the Punchdown. Please feel free to continue the conversation below in the comments and share this with someone you think might find it interesting. Thank you.